If you eat a McDonald's every day, you're going to gradually become fatter. And it's the same with running. If you just run every day or twice a week, you will become a better runner. And that's why we want to make running a habit. 58% of people give up running after 30 days. No wonder there's a mental health pandemic, because we need running as part of our cocktail. I believe run coaching is broken. PDF plans are rubbish. They're just so generic. It's unbelievable. We're building run coaching to help people be better runners.
The Coopah Running app, which you've launched, has been an evolution of your own life's experiences.
Mum was probably quite ill and we didn't know about it. She went and ran a half marathon, and at the end she collapsed. We had to make the really difficult decision, my brother and dad and I, to turn off life support.
How old were you then?
I'd just turned 23. My best mate, he was like, make sure you look after yourself. And that was the last thing he ever said to me, because a few weeks later he passed away, and my OCD was telling me I'd killed them.
What had happened to you was so incredibly rare and so incredibly unlucky.
I had zero idea what depression looked like. I just was like, I'm a mental person, because that's how I used to see mental health. Because I've seen myself, the power of running, and it saved my life. I care about every single person downloading that app not stopping running. Running is the closest you can ever get to feeling like an elite. You'll never play in a World Cup final, but you can go and run London Marathon and you will get the same medal, have run the same course, have had the same support as what Mo Farah, Paula Radcliffe experiences. And I can't think of any other sport which does that.
I live a nomadic lifestyle, and I'm never in one place for too long. So from time to time, I find it very convenient to order groceries in the form of a Gusto box. I've been using Gusto for nearly 5 years now. It's a delivery company that sends you fresh food and all the ingredients you need to cook delicious meals at home, along with very easy to follow recipe cards. They have over 90 recipes every week, so there really is something for everyone. And so many of their recipes I've returned to again and again, because their meals are just delicious. I've got a referral code. I've shared it with so many of my friends. It means they get cheap groceries on their first few boxes and I get credit in return. I'll link it below. Use it to sign up and you get a pretty hefty discount off your first box. There's no subscription required, and you can order just one box whenever you want. Thank you, Pete, for joining me, especially so soon after arriving back into England from a recent journey to Pakistan. What's been happening over there?
So part of my kind of hobbies is seeing the world. I absolutely love going and seeing different countries. So I found one of the easy ways to go to some quite random countries is by following the England football and cricket team. So the England cricket team have been playing Pakistan over the last month in Multan and Rawalpindi. So I went over there to watch some cricket, but luckily it ended after 2 days, which meant I could see quite a bit of the country, which is really good.
Amazing. And you've been connecting with run communities out there as well. Tell me about who you've been connecting with.
Definitely. I think that's one of the really cool things now is just how there's running communities everywhere. So we went on Strava, we typed in clubs, nearest location, and there's two relatively big running clubs there. There was Islamabad Run With Us and there was Islamabad Running Club. So we joined Islamabad Running Club on the first day when we landed, and we went and had a track session with them, which was super cool. There's about 20 people turned up, and yeah, which was really fun. One of their guys had just finished the Chicago Marathon. So at the end we had some cake, and it was quite nice to see how the Pakistanis do it, because obviously there isn't a drinking culture there, and here in the UK it's wet, it's rainy, it's dark, and we always end in a pub, which can actually probably lead to quite a negative impact on your running if you go and have 3 or 4 pints. Whereas there we ended up enjoying a cake with them all and sitting and discussing running. And then with Islamabad Run With Us, they had a virtual Lahore Marathon. So Lahore Marathon was going on and they decided to do it virtually in Islamabad. So I joined them, and there was about 15 of us that took part in the virtual 5K. And afterwards we went to this beautiful rooftop juice bar and sat looking into the kind of mountains. I'd call them mountains, they called them hills, and just enjoying an orange and carrot juice. And I was like, this is actually so much better than going to a pub. And it was really beautiful to see how it happens. And I was speaking to Islamabad Run With Us founder, and was like, how do you feel that there's another run club? And he was like, it's brilliant. He was like, I want loads of running clubs in Islamabad, because if we get lots of running clubs, the culture grows. And he was saying the big problem there is no running shops. So they have to import everything from America, Dubai, and it's really expensive. And it was really interesting to hear those barriers of entries they've got in Pakistan. It's like just buying running gear is really difficult. So it was amazing to sit with kind of these two founders of running crews out there, and how they've been inspired by seeing it on Instagram, etc., and started their own thing. And one of the guys actually started Islamabad Marathon as well. So hopefully we'll be partnering with them next year and trying to help just grow the running culture in Pakistan as well.
Partnering with them through Coopah?
Correct, yeah. So we'll be like the training app, and we'll give them some sponsorship money and help them kind of grow in and make it a bigger event, because these two guys were really passionate about making Pakistan actually have a running hub, because running's difficult out there. There isn't pavements. It's like, they have to run at 5:30 or run multiple laps of parks. So it'd be like running around Battersea Park. Well, I know a lot of people do that, but it'd be like running around Battersea Park is the only place you can run. And they just want to try and grow and get the government to invest more in running. So yeah, really interesting running culture out there.
Yeah, it must have definitely been something that opened your eyes to the privilege that we have in the UK with access to running. What kind of similarities did you see on a community level when you were just out there running with people?
The similarities on a community level, and I think this is what's beautiful, is although our cultures are so different, like we'd go to the pub, they'd go and have a juice. Running, it doesn't matter what skin color you are, what your culture, what your beliefs is, running has the same effect on everybody. So everyone turns up a little bit tired after work, or tired for the 5:30 start, tired because they've just woken up. But after a few minutes of running, everyone's cheerful, smiling. People start to open up, people start to go deeper, like they didn't know who we were. And at the start, they were a bit like, who are these random British guys? But as we started to run, they got more and more kind of, I guess, deeper connections with them. And I think that's what's so beautiful about running, is when you run, everyone's on the same level playing field. It doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire or whether you're a guy off the street. When you run, you're breathing hard. You're trying to just keep putting one foot in front of each other. And I think that was the similarities, was just the power of running and what it can do to you when you are running with other people. I really think that was the similarity. But then I guess the big difference was, let's say, for example, we went out on the first day, we went out and we ordered 4 curries, 4 dals, 1 karahi, which is like a very spicy curry, 8 naan breads, 4 rices, and 4 chai teas, and it came to £4. And I was like, wow, we've literally eaten like kings, and it's cost us £4, and there was 4 of us, so it's £1 each. So I was expecting to go to Run Club, and they all had kind of fake running shoes on, etc. And I got there and they all had like the hookers, they had all the brands on, and they were like, running's really hard for us out here because these cost me $250. And actually I took a step back and was like, we've just eaten all that food and it's cost us £1 each. In England, that would probably cost me £40 each. So actually the fact that being able to afford running shoes and running kit and being able to go abroad to do races, there's a huge barrier for them. And I think it's something I don't know the answer to, but how can we get these countries running more? I think we probably need cheaper shoes, more accessible trainers, just so they can run, because I don't know, but I would imagine it's an incredibly wealthy sport to do in Pakistan, whereas obviously we say in England everyone can run, and running's probably one of the sports that's most easily accessible, whereas in Pakistan I feel like it is a really one for the rich, I would say.
It does kind of pose wider questions, and it can be probably somewhat ironic that not just Pakistan but other types of countries where it's perhaps shoes like that are made, are then sold at extortionate levels from their point of view to other places in the world where it's more affordable. But it's ironic that it can come from countries like that where when it comes full circle back to them, they cannot afford the very things that they might be even producing, for instance, in factories and things like that.
Yeah, and I actually had this discussion with them. So they were amazing. They gave us like running club tops. I should have worn it today. And I said to the guy, this feels really good quality. Where are you getting it made? And he was like, this is local Pakistan quality. And I was like, oh, what do you mean by that? And he was like, we're not allowed to have the export stuff. So although it's made there, like 5 minutes down the road, that's all gets exported. So all the good stuff gets exported. So they have the shirts they have aren't the highest quality shirts that actually is in Pakistan. So that makes me feel really shit, to be honest. It's like we're sat in England, and because we're willing to pay £80 for a t-shirt, we get the highest quality stuff. But actually these guys who are making it, even the guys who are trying to build this amazing run club, they don't get access to the best stuff. I haven't run in it yet, but it feels good quality. But I just felt to myself like that's completely wrong.
It's great to hear that you've had that experience and seen that with your eyes, because you are someone of, I suppose, great influence in the running community, in the wider running world, because of what you've chosen to make a career out of with your running app. So I imagine you are in circles where you can bring this up to other people and at least start the conversations to be like, what can we do to close that circle, to make access more readily available to people, not just in the UK, but on the wider scope of things across the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I even said to the guy who runs the Islamabad Marathon, like, what are your difficulties with running? Like, how hard is it? Is getting medals difficult? And he started to tell me how just getting the bib and chip time are really hard. So affording the chip technology is super hard. So he's gone for like the cheap version, like where you put the bit of paper through your shoe. But he was like, I don't know how high quality is it. I want the Islamabad Marathon to be seen as a really high quality event. And I was like, look, I can't promise anything, but I work in the London Marathon office. And when I get back, I will speak to them and tell them we've met and there's barriers, and like I would love to come out here with a member of their team. And London's amazing for that. They have a real they've got a guy called Hamid, and he's just fantastic at helping grow other events. So you see him working with the communities here in the UK, but he also, what you never see is he helps other marathons out as well. So there's one in the Middle East that he helps out and we've met with, and we work together on how we can improve their event. And I instantly thought of him and was like, I'd love to come out in January to Islamabad Marathon with him and look at how we can help make this marathon better, because running should be a worldwide sport. And I think what I saw was that it is, but it isn't, if that makes any sense. Like, there could easily be 500 people that turn up to this run club, but currently they're not. And I'm sure that's because of the barriers of accessibility. And I said to him as well, I said, so we're doing the virtual Lahore Marathon today. Like, how much is it to run the Lahore Marathon? And he was like, 2,000 rupees. And that is it's 370 to the pound. So that's about £6-7. And I was like, wow, you can go and do it. You can pay £7. You can run a marathon. And he was like, there's drink stops, you get a medal, you get a chip. He was like, but that's expensive. Like, in Pakistan, that's expensive. And then I worked it out and I was like, yeah, that's probably the equivalent of paying £60 for London Marathon. And I just find that it's all super interesting how there's all that's what they spend and it's expensive to them. And actually, when I go back to that curry, it's probably quite unaffordable for the many people in Pakistan to run out there. So I definitely want to bring up those conversations. I think the first is where I've got good links with, say, London Marathon events, but then also I've got links with running brands, so I can easily turn up to the running brands and go, what happens to the knockoff clothes? There must be loads of clothes that are made in Pakistan. Are they being sent to England? Are they being just left? And surely we could do a partnership with Islamabad Run Club where they get all these X-brand knockoffs that aren't good enough to sell in the UK, because maybe there's a stitching problem. So I think that's definitely something I want to see how I can influence and help the community when I get to that.
And even connecting with run communities and runners on a ground level, because I can look up to my wardrobe and see that I've got more than one running top per day of the week if I choose to. Some of them I've got rid of, charity shops, or you can also donate them if you can find a hub that can take them, which sometimes is not also easy and accessible. But like I've got event t-shirts, which in the moment you want and you like because it makes you feel, but actually, in the months afterwards, you're like, well, it's not my favorite running top now. And it either sits there, but these kind of things could be are hugely valuable to people who don't have access to them.
Definitely. And that's what we do with the Refugee Run Club as well. And Jonty from Run Limited is amazing. He's just opened up a store in Cheapside, and he rang me and he was like, there's people coming into the store and they remember when we had the pop-up store during the London Marathon and there was a Refugee Run Club clothes bank. And they were like, where's the Refugee Run Club clothes bank? And he was like, oh, we haven't got it. And he rang me and he was like, can we discuss how people can bring stuff in and donate? And there's so much of that actually, like, let's not take it to the charity shop who probably might not even want it. Let's actually build this community where you can go and donate this kit, and then we will take it and give it to refugees who they do have nothing. And again, that's what we did with London Marathon events. We were like, look, everyone in this office loves running. Can we just put bots in the office and people can donate shoes and kit? And we do that with them. We do that with Jog On, and that's how we kit out our refugees. Is we literally just take donations, and the more people who can just donate that or not just chuck it out. Because I remember I used to just chuck it out. I used to be like, oh, nobody wants a Cardiff Half 2004 finisher shirt, I'll just chuck that. But actually, when I see the refugees that we work with grab that nice red shirt that says Adidas on it, or Nike, or whoever the sponsors are, they absolutely love it. And I think we can really help make someone's day, rather than just chuck it out, which can't be good for the planet either.
That's amazing. I'll have to look into where people can donate on a wider scale, not just in London, because I think a lot of people probably are in the similar position where they do feel like, oh yeah, this shirt means nothing to me, but hearing actually that it could mean so much to someone else would be a really good use of that resource. So I'll see what else we can do. Jonty's Run Limited in London is one thing, but there must be other places as well that can take stuff and donate them around.
We're actually working with Parkrun at the moment on how we can have a weekly closed donation spot at all parkruns across the country.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's something that'll hopefully be coming out very soon.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, keep my ears peeled for that. You're someone who has created your whole kind of lifestyle around running, and the Coopah running app, which you've launched, has been an evolution of your own life's experiences. So let's talk a bit about that and your journey to launching the app and beyond, and how that all came about. First of all, what were your first ever running experiences in life? Because that's been something that's been part of your family life.
Yeah, I guess my first ever running experience is probably like everyone else's. It's, I guess, the school sports day at primary school is doing, what would it be, like 60 metres? And I remember, or even if you look at Egg and Spoon, that's still running up and down with an egg and spoon. And then I remember going to secondary school at 11, and we'd have what we call the 60 pointer, and that was our cross country course. I grew up on Dartmoor, so I was quite fortunate that our cross country course wasn't lapped at the school playing fields. And it started with a massive hill, and then it would run round, back down, and it was a 5K, and we'd have to do that every week in winter. And I remember you had to do two, they would count your two fastest times over like the term. So you always would run two properly, and then the other 8 or 10, however many it was in that term, you'd completely piss about, and it would just be a bit of an adventure really with your mates. Like, you'd be out of school running around like these trails, and you'd be jumping in the water, jumping in the rivers, messing about. And actually, when I think back to it, that was probably some of the best times of my school life, was going out and doing the 60 pointer, and it was lashing down and we got super muddy and we were doing belly slides, and apparently that was running. So I guess that was my first ever experience. But then I guess when it gets into the experience that probably most of the listeners are interested in, it was through my mum. So like I said, I'm from Devon, and Foot and Mouth started. I don't know if anyone remembers Foot and Mouth, which obviously kind of ruined quite a lot of farmers' livelihoods. And our local village was where they used to burn all the like animals who had foot and mouth. And they said, we need to do something to fundraise for the farmers. So they set up what they called the Ruby Run. And the Ruby Run was a run from Holsworthy to Haverley. And it was 13.1 miles. So it was the half marathon. And I remember my mum going, I'm going to do it. And my mum used to ride horses, and she was like, I'm going to get into this running. And she ran it really well. She didn't really train, and she did sub 2 hours. And a few people from like who were good runners, there was no running club near us, but they said, "You're good at this. You should start taking it up." And then this event started to grow year on year, and Mum kept doing it year on year. And then they decided they were going to start a running club. So Oakhampton Running Club started, and there was a guy called Andrew Vallance who was kind of key behind that. And my mum never was involved in it, but she was one of the founding members. She was like at the first one, and it's now a booming run club. And it was at that point when she was like, "Oh, maybe I could run a marathon." So she got into London Marathon, and she was just completely hooked. And
How old are you back then?
I would have been about 12, I would say. 12, 13, when she got hooked. I'd have to Google when the mouth was.
And so you can remember the point where your mom kind of got into running, and that took a direction in her life. It wasn't just that your mom was always a runner. You could witness what that did to her life.
Yeah, I remember the day she did the Refugee Run. I was playing cricket, and it went past my house, past my cricket pitch. And I remember her coming down with the medal and the t-shirt and her smile, and she was so happy. I remember my best mate, Henry Bedford, his dad, Ken, had run it as well when my mum overtook her at like mile 8. And I remember the banter. There was like, they were like, "I went out too fast. You just kept going steady." And that's just how beautiful running is. And we see that now. But yeah, I remember the exact day that changed. And then I remember my mum coming home one day, and she was like limping. And I was like, "What's happened?" And she'd basically been bucked off her horse. And my mum used to take green retired race horses and try and turn them into eventers. That was kind of like her job. And I was like to her, "Mum, one day you're going to come home and you're never going to be able to run again." And she was like, "Don't say that." I was like, "Look, you can't run now because you've been bucked off this horse." And she made that decision the next day. She was like, "Do you know what? I've got this love for running. It's amazing. I'm going to just focus on running, and I'm going to be really good at it." And then that was when she went and ran London Marathon, and then she got a Boston qualifier. And then she said to me, "There's these things called the Abbott World Majors. I don't even know if it was Abbott at that time, but there was these things called the World Majors." And she was like, "I'm going to do them." And I remember I must have been 18 at this point. And I remember saying to her, "Oh yeah, what a great way to see the world. Like, Mum, with running, you can really go and see the world. Like, you could go wherever you want in the world." And I was about to go backpacking at that time. And she was like, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to do all 6 major marathons." So she did Boston, Berlin and London, and she was in for New York, Chicago and Tokyo. So she was going to get all the 6 majors. And I remember her saying she would have been the 6th. I think she was going to be when she did the 6th, she would have been like the first 300 people to do it. I got my 6th major this year, and I think there was 400 people collecting their medals just on that day. So it shows how big it's got. But I remember going out to Boston with her and just going to her, "Mum, this is like what it must feel like to play at Wembley." And I always wanted to be a professional cricketer or footballer. And at 15, 16, I knew that was never going to happen. And I was like, "Mum, literally people are shouting your name. Like they're shouting Marilyn as you go past, and they don't know who you are. It must feel like you're famous." And she was like, "Yeah, it's a good buzz." And right, that was when I got addicted to running.
Because, we go and watch footballers play at Wembley, but we're not allowed on the pitch. We're not allowed to play. And you can go and watch the elites run London Marathon. And if you are lucky enough, you also get to run, I say alongside them, but you're never going to run alongside, but you'll run the exact same course, just like they did.
Yeah.
That's so unique within sport, that you can have that access to something that the elites and the professionals do as well.
And that's what I love about running. And the thing that always sticks with me is what my mum said to me once, is she said, you will never play at Wembley. And if you do play at Wembley, it will be because you've paid, or you're a member of like Club Wembley, but you play against a load of other rubbish footballers. But she was like, "You'll never play in a World Cup final, but you can go and run London Marathon and you will get the same medal, have run the same course, have had the same support as what Mo Farah, Paula Radcliffe experiences." And like, I can't think of any other sport which does that. Like if you look at Tour de France, I know you can cycle the course the day before, but the fans aren't out there. You don't get the same medal. You don't get the same atmosphere. And you can also be on TV while it's running it as well. So I do really think that running is the closest you can ever get to feeling like an elite sports person.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, especially having that access to the TV. Like you feel like you're the celebrity in that moment as well. It's just as the elites.
Definitely. So I guess that was my first running experience. There's a few there.
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. At this time when you were watching your mom and she completed 3 of her majors, were you running at the time?
So the third major I ran with my mum. So her third major was billing. And I remember being 17 and going to mum, Mum, I've read that when you're 17, you can run a half marathon. So the minute I turned 17, I went and ran the Plymouth Half Marathon. And I remember being in sixth form and my IT teacher ran the half marathon as well. And I remember overtaking her. And I said to Mum, that was all right, but I can't walk for like weeks. And she was like, go and train, go and do a marathon. And then she said to me, Pete, I've managed to get in Berlin Marathon. And I was like, there must be a way I can come and run this marathon with you. Like, I'll definitely. So I booked to come and support. And then I found a way in. And I ran, Berlin Marathon with her. So I ran half final ever marathon because she's passed away sadly. But half final ever marathon was Berlin, and that was my first ever marathon. And I think that's really beautiful that kind of I took the baton from her when she was at her last and I was at my first. It felt a really nice handover.
What do you remember when you crossed the line after that first marathon? Were you with your mum as well? Did you run together?
We ran the first 15, 16 miles together. And then I remember mum being like, I don't feel very well. Do you want to, you go on? And I remember finishing the marathon and it was incredible. Like running back then, it was 2015 and running back then wasn't like it is now. And people often ask me like, what are the majors like? And I remember Berlin Marathon in 2015, there was nobody watching. It was like really strange. But I remember finishing that marathon and was like, I loved and hated that. Like, I'll never do that again. And then I remember getting my first stein of beer, having my medal around my neck, and I've got the photo of it with my mum. And I was like to my mum, I'm going to come New York. I'm going to come Tokyo. Like, I'm going to do them all with you now. And I can't quite pinpoint what that buzz was, but there was definitely something post that run where I was like, that was amazing. And I want to do more of them. And it probably was that I could get to travel with my mum and go on awesome adventures with mum and do something pretty cool at the same time.
Yeah. Your mom completed 3. She wasn't able to complete the other 3. What happened there?
So I think that mum was probably quite ill and we didn't know about it. And it turned out that she went and ran a half marathon when she was 60 years old and got a PB. And at the end she collapsed. And then that led into a heart attack, and she died from it. But she was a fighter, and they said to us when she was in the coma, they said to us, we've never known anyone have a heart attack at this sort of scale and still be fighting it. But they basically said, there's 2 things that's going to happen here. She'll either get through it and she'll be in this coma for 6 months. And if she does get through it, there's going to be absolutely like nothing she will do. They didn't say, but basically to keep it easy, she'll be a cabbage. And mum's always used to say, if there was ever, like if I ever had to go in an old people's home, if there was ever a time I just couldn't do anything, I'd rather not be around. And they said, we suggest we need to turn off life support and see what happens. So we had to make the really difficult decision, my brother and dad and I, to turn off life support.
How old were you then?
I was 20. I just turned 23. It was a week after my 23rd birthday. And yeah, we had to make the decision. And I guess my brother was 7 years older than me. And at the time we probably weren't really that close. But for 2 weeks we were traveling up and down about 50 minutes in total there and back, so an hour and 40 in total, to just go in and wait to see if there was any changes. And I remember being really young and naive and was like, we can't turn life support off. Mum's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. And for 2 weeks, I remember overhearing like my brother and dad talking, and they were like, I don't think Pete quite knows how severe this is. And I'm a very optimistic person. And I was like, I do know, but she's going to be fine. It's mum. She'll get through it. And I think back now and it was like, yeah, there was absolutely no chance she was ever going to get through that. But we wanted to, they gave us 2 weeks and she didn't get any better. And yeah, I remember it as if it was yesterday saying bye to her. And it was at that point I said to her, we all got to go in and see her individually. And I was like to her mum, you'll still complete the majors. I'll do it for you. And that was the plan.
I can't even fathom what goes through your mind under the circumstances that your mom was in and your family was in, with a decision like that at such a young age, that came as a complete shock that you had no time for. And because you were so young at that time in your life, what support did you get at that time for that period?
Nothing. Nothing. I think back now and it's crazy. Like, we literally came back to London. We had 2 weeks to plan the funeral, and I remember getting really angry and being like, I just couldn't allow it that it happened. I was really close to my mum. There was no support. And then we came back to London, and I was luckily living with my brother at the time, which probably made it a lot easier. But I remember just kind of going straight back into work, and I just moved to London. I was like a fresh grad. I was 6 weeks into my job, and I just remember kind of going straight back into work, and there was no real support. I was super lucky because my director and chief commercial officer had both lost their mum at a young age. My chief commercial officer lost his dad at a young age, and they kept checking in on me. But there was no support. I think people come to a funeral. This is how I kind of remember it, is people come to the funeral's done, and then everyone forgets, and no one really thinks about, are you grieving? And it took me probably 18 months to actually realise I was grieving. There was zero support.
If you could, right now in this moment, talk to your 23-year-old self, now with hindsight, what advice, what would you say to him that you feel that now you could have done differently back then to help in that situation?
Speak to your mates, be really open about how you're feeling, and don't drink alcohol. I would probably say. And I think also speak to your brother and dad. Like, they're going through it. Your dad's just lost his wife, your brother's also lost his mum, and I think try and speak and build a support network, and just have some numbers you can ring when you're struggling, because I also think none of your mates can also understand how it is, because no one expects to lose their mum that young. And since it's happened, I've met people who have lost their parents at birth, their parents at 6, at 10, at 12. And I sit back and go to myself, shit, I'm super lucky to lose my mum at 23. At least I got 22 years with her. Some people don't even get a day with their parents. But I wish I knew that at that time. And I wish there was like some advice, like a support network that I could have spoken to. But none of my mates had lost their parents. One guy had, but he doesn't really talk about it. So I wish you can just come forward and more. And I think now when I know someone who's lost, say, their parents, I always just reply and be like, so sorry to hear what's happened. If you ever need me, I'm here. And then I'll always check in with them like a few weeks later and a few weeks later again. Whereas I think so many people just go like, they'll try and say like, I know how it feels, or like, I lost my grandparent. It's like, it's quite different. I think my advice would just be like, be really honest and speak to people and tell them how you're feeling.
Since then, you've done a lot to honour the memory of your mom through your own running, also through the launch of the Coopah running app. I guess before you got to that point where you decided that, how did you navigate your life in the preceding years when I must have felt incredibly lost and lonely and not sure of what was happening in your own life?
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really dark. So I moved to London, and I remember we just got up. It's weird what you remember. We just got back, and because mum had passed, my car had been in, my brother lived on a little terrace street in Kent, and it quite competitive about where you park your car. So they didn't like that my brother had me up there and there was 2 cars on the terrace street. And I remember we literally got through the door and someone knocked on the door and was like, when's this car actually going to move? And I was like, you can't write this. Like, we've just got through the door after being home for like 2-3 weeks. And their biggest problem is that they can't park outside their house. So I said to my brother, look, I'll take the car home. I'll find somewhere, I'll move out. And he was like, look, you don't need to, like, it's fine. I was like, no, it's fine. Like, I need to move out. Like, you and Laura have been amazing to me, but I'm literally living in your spare room. Like, it's unfair. I'll move out. And then moved out. I got a place in Angel and my office was in Angel. So I was just off Upper Street, which is the main street in Angel, which is in North London. And it was probably the worst thing I could have done because Upper Street is full of bars. So I'd leave work and to get home, there would always be a load of bars open. And I used to live opposite a bar that was a late night bar. So it meant that if I'd gone out drinking with my work colleagues in Angel in the brew house, which was under our office, there's loads of options for me to go drinking on my own. And that's what I did. And then I remember moving into the house, and Becky and Harry, who I moved in with, were amazing. They were like incredible for 18 months. But I remember also being like them, oh yeah, my mum died like a month ago. And I remember them just thinking like, what? Like, okay. And like, I will always remember them thinking like, they don't really know how to react to this. I'm like a bit of a rare kid here. Like, that shouldn't have happened to me. It's not normal. But they were amazing. They were great. And then I just basically just used to drink way too much. And it then got to the point where I was working for Expedia and I was traveling all the time. So one year I did 78 flights in a year. And I just remember being like, I'm losing all my mates here because I'm always traveling. And I was meant to fly to Kiev that day, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't physically get on this flight. And I was like, that's it. I'm gonna take my own life. Like, all decided. It wasn't like a last minute, like on the spot decision. Like, I'd been thinking about it for weeks. Like, when you fly, there's nothing you can do except watch films, which my ADHD doesn't really like watching films. So a lot of thoughts go through my head. And I was like, this isn't what I want. I'll end it here. And then luckily for me, I got found and it never happened. And that's why I'm here today. But also during that kind of horrible, like 18 months, my best mate, they're twin brothers. And I met one twin George traveling and the other one Will when I got back. And we became like real close friends, the three of us. And he rang me and he was like, you're struggling from the grief. Let's go and run Rotterdam Marathon. And he was a big Aston Villa fan, and Villa had won the Europa Cup in Rotterdam. And he was like, they'll never play in Europe again. Let's go and run Rotterdam Marathon. So we went and ran that, and he was moaning about a bad back at about mile 20, and he'd actually just recovered from liver cancer. And I was like, oh mate, you're just going through the wall. Like, you'll be fine. And it turned out he actually had brain cancer and ran it with a tumour. And not that long after, we were in Iceland. We were in Nice watching England v Iceland. And anyone who likes football will remember we lost to Iceland in the Euros, which is pretty embarrassing. And I remember the last thing I said to him was, mate, see you soon, look after yourself. And he was like, make sure you look after yourself. And that was the last thing he ever said to me, because a few weeks later he passed away. And I think all of that together just ended me. It was kind of like I'd run 2 marathons in my life and both of them were no longer here. And my OCD was telling me I'd killed them. And obviously I hadn't, but that was my OCD telling me. So it's just a really, really kind of dark place for me for about 2 years.
Yeah. And I mean, what you couldn't realize in that moment was what had happened to you was so incredibly rare and so incredibly unlucky. But I can imagine, and we'll talk about this in a minute, your OCD, about attaching that to the fact that it was linked to running. You mentioned that you reached a stage in your life where you considered taking your own life. You were depressed. Did you know you were depressed at the time? Were you aware of that? That is what it was?
No, I had no idea that it was grief, depression, OCD, anxiety. I had absolutely no idea. I just thought that I'd killed them and it was my time to kill myself, and that was the easiest way out of living with this. So I had zero idea what depression looked like. I just was like, I can't have depression. Didn't even come across my mind that I was depressed.
Because the signs of, especially not wanting to leave the house to go and do this trip that you had planned, is the hallmarks of someone who's in a depressed state. What happened that enabled you to unlock what that was, to get diagnosed and to understand more about it?
It was my partner at the time. She was like, you have to go and talk to somebody. She was like, you've not spoken to me about your mum or Will, like literally you've just don't even mention them, like, and you just kind of crack on. And she was like, you have to go and get therapy, and if you don't, I'll leave you. And I was like, I don't need therapy. And she was like, you're literally wanting to take your own life. You need therapy. And I was like, no, therapy's for weak people. I don't need therapy. And I remember the first day going into therapy and the bloke was like 2 minutes late. And I remember him being like, I'm really sorry, my son's been hit playing hockey at school. And I was like, I don't give a shit about your son. Like, I don't want to be here. So shall I just leave? And I remember him going, oof. And now I know quite a bit about depression and stuff. Like, that's a clear sign. Like when you start to argue, that kind of thing, I didn't care about upsetting anyone, whereas now I really care about upsetting people. And I remember at the end of the like therapy, he's just said to me straight away, he was like, you've got clinical depression, severe anxiety and OCD. And I was like, no, I haven't. And he was like, you have. And I was like, no, I really haven't. I'm completely fine, mate. And I was like, I'm only here because my partner told me I have to be here. And he was like, no, like you need to listen to me now. And I was like, okay. And I remember just leaving and being like, what? Like, what? And I remember it was up near King's Cross, near like Euston, that sort of area. And I remember going, well, what do I do now? And I remember like ringing my partner and being like, yeah, I'm all good. And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, nothing.
Just after one session?
This is after one session. He diagnosed me there and then. And he was like, I am really worried about you. And I just remember going home and just lying there and was like, I'm a mental person. Because that's how I used to see mental health. I was like, I'm different. There's stuff wrong with me. And then as things started to go on, I had the drugs, I had all that, and it just wasn't working for me. And then that's when I refound my love for running.
You mentioned your OCD. What kind of things can you now see that you were doing which you've helped alleviate, and how have you treated that form of what you happened back then?
Yeah, so I think when I look back to it, I think I've had OCD all my life. And I think there's a clear thing where people think they've got OCD because they have to leave this cut or their brand looking forward. But for me, I couldn't progress to the next part of my life until I'd done certain things 3 times. And the first time I remember it, I was 10 years old and I was playing I had county trials and I was in the county squad. And I remember taking my mark and asking to, like, so you ask for middle stamp. And I remember having to touch everything 3 times. So I had to mark it 3 times. I had to push my pads down 3 times, put my gloves on 3 times. And this was after every single ball. I was having to do stuff 3 times. And I think then when I'd get out, I'd be like, right, which one did I not do? Like, did I not touch my helmet 3 times? And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't. That's why I got out. And then when bad stuff would happen to me, as I got older, I'd link it back to not doing stuff 3 times.
You were constantly blaming yourself for things that were out of your control.
Yeah, constantly from 10 years old. And then I remember going to South Africa on a cricket tour in February 2016. And I remember walking out of the office, and bearing in mind I'd only been working in this company for 5 weeks. I was fresh out of uni. And the girl next to me, she's a good friend, she said to me, you're quite weird, aren't you? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, it takes you about 30 minutes to leave the office. And I was like, no, it doesn't. And she was like, yeah, it does. You turn your laptop off, you put it down, you pick it up, you press 3 buttons 3 times, and then you scrabble it out, and then you do it again. And I was like, yeah, it's because you spoke and I just have to have like a minute to do my ritual, and no one in the office can speak. But obviously in an office, people are speaking. And then I was like, oh God. And then like friends would go to me, why does it take you so long to leave the house? Like, why do you always have to run back to the house and check that the door's locked and stuff? And I was like, I just worry that someone will break in. I'm scared of burglars. But actually now what I've learned is that was OCD. And, you'd be late to stuff because I didn't want to leave the house. And that kind of then led to me being in South Africa. And I was like, right, I'm in a new country here. I don't need to listen to these chimps on my shoulders. I'm not going to check my bag 3 times. When I go to bat, I was on a cricket tour. I was like, I'm not going to do anything 3 times. And I had a really good knock against Cape Town CC. And I was like, I didn't do anything. Amazing. Like, I don't need to do this. I remember being really, really happy that I thought I'd conquered it. I landed back in the UK. Let's say it was a Monday. Fell asleep, like tired from the trip. And then my brother came in and he was like, Pete, mum's had a heart attack. We need to drive to Exeter. And I was like, it's because I didn't touch anything 3 times in South Africa. And I then lived with that for so long and I still live with it now, is she died because I didn't touch my bag 3 times when I was back, and I didn't do things 3 times because I didn't want to look a weirdo.
Do you understand now that wasn't the consequence of your actions?
Sometimes I do. I think probably 90% of the time I know, but there's still times when I'm down and I'm like, no, that is still why she died. And even though every therapist in the world has told me that's not why, and when I'm in a good mindset, I know that's not why, but I definitely still live with guilt 100%. But I know when I'm in a good frame of mind, that's not why she died. But I definitely still live at times with guilt of that.
It's interesting to hear that is still part of your life, that there's a certain part of your mind that is still living with a smaller form of OCD, I suppose. What things have you put in place to make sure that this doesn't take over your mindset?
Yeah, I guess for a number of years since I moved to Hong Kong, I kind of ran away from life. When I got diagnosed, I was like, I need to quit everything. I need to change my life completely. And I guess I had a midlife crisis at the age of 25. And I moved to Hong Kong, and I remember that's when I was on my drugs, like for my mental health. And I remember there being like, this is the time to stop doing all of that. And that's when things have like kind of got a lot better. But whenever something bad in my life happens, I will always still go back to, right, what didn't I do? And I actually stopped playing cricket. And I think that helps, because I think cricket definitely is a trigger for me. And I played this summer and I was still doing everything. And I was like, right, it's not gone, has it? But it's now not at a state where I'm like, if I don't do this, someone will die. It's at a state where if I don't do this, I'll get out next ball. And it's actually really interesting how many times I do get out next ball, because my mind's telling me I can't do it, whereas that's absolutely not true. It's just, that's how cricket works, really. If you think you're going to get out, you will. If you think you're going to hit a 4, you probably will. I believe the mind's really strong. So yeah, there is definitely things I do. Like if I see that I'm doing something, I'll be like, stop it. And I'll be like, that's okay. But I also know when I'm running into trouble again, because it will get bad. So I struggled a few days before I was going back to Pakistan. And I remember going up and down the stairs 3 times. And it's because each time it was like, no, you need to go do that. Otherwise this is going to happen. But the good thing is, what's going to happen isn't someone's going to die anymore. It's you'll miss your flight. So I can kind of live with missing my flight. But if it went back to someone's going to die, that's when I'd be like, right, I need to go back into therapy and get myself sorted again. But luckily it's not as bad as what it used to be.
So you talked about your therapy. Has that been something that's been ongoing in your life?
I think it's been hard because I used to just shout at my therapist because I was struggling so much. And I think they were the one person I could take everything out on. And then I do still have therapy, and I'm happy to say that. I think therapy is great. I definitely need it more. But I live a busy life and I find it hard to fit it in. But also just speaking with friends, like I've got friends, there's 3 friends on my phone, and they know when I'm down, and they'll reach out to me. And it's amazing when they reach out to me. They're like, you haven't put anything on Instagram. You haven't put anything on Strava. You haven't messaged me for a week. Like, are you okay? And I see them more as my therapy. It's those friends who I can just openly be like, mate, I'm not okay. Like, I haven't left my bed today. Can we chat? And that's more my therapy, is just being able to speak openly with mates, and rather than a therapist. So that's usually my therapy. And running definitely helps. But when I'm at my lowest, I can't run.
You talked about the cocktail. You have your magic cocktail, which is your antidepressants, your therapy, and your running.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the running aspect of it. And I suppose this kind of came back into your life at a time when you probably needed it most to kind of complement, what was going on with your depression, your anxiety, your OCD, to complement your therapy that was going on at the time. This was also a part of your therapy.
Yeah. So I remember coming back and putting out all my running stuff, and my partner being like, you're going to go for a run. I was like, oh, really? I don't want to go for a run. And I put my run stuff on.
Had you neglected running for quite a while?
Yeah, I hadn't. So what actually also happened is when my best mate passed away in August, my dad had bumped into someone he knew back home, and they were like, has your son got checked for their heart? And he was like, what? Why? He just had a heart attack. And they were like, well, they should go and get checked. And what it turned out was that my mum died at 60, my granddad died at 60, and my granddad's brother or something also had a heart attack. So they were like, it's very likely that there's a heart problem in your family. So my brother and auntie went, they were completely fine. I went and they were like, there's something not right with you. And I'm still being checked now, so I'm not fully signed off. And they were like, we think you've got ARVC, which is basically where the right size of your heart is enlarged and the oxygen blood can't pump. And even today, I still don't really know what it is because I don't want it to know what it is. But they were like, you can't do it. You can't. And at that time, I'd just finished an Ironman, and they were like, you can't do an Ironman ever again. Like, it's just too dangerous. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. And then they were like, you can't run. And I was like, no, I need to run. And I'd literally just found running because I'd come home this day, went for a run, ran for an hour. And I reckon I probably ran 2 or 3K because I just cried because I felt so connected to Mum and Will. But that was the first time I felt connected to them since they passed. And I was like, so you're telling me that I finally found this perfect cocktail, which was antidepressants, therapy, or talking, because therapy can be just talking to your best mates, or not even best mates. It can be complete randomers. Mine was someone I met in a bar when I was drunk, and running. And now you're taking away running. I was like, this is like an espresso martini without the alcohol. And I was like, I just can't do this. And then as things went on, I'd shout at them and I'd get really angry at them. I was like, you have to let me run. And then they said, look, you can go for 30-minute runs, but you have to watch your heart rate. And that's what I did. And then gradually, I was like, you don't understand how important to me running is. And they then in the end said, you can start running marathons again, but you have to be super, super careful. And I'm still not officially signed off by the NHS, but I am now running again. And I've got a training app, so I push myself pretty hard, but there's always this voice in the back of my mind when things get hard and it's like, slow down. And that bugs me because I know I'm not hitting the times I can because I'm always only at 160 heart rate, and I don't have the confidence to get up to 180. And if you look through my Strava, I've never done this, but I bet you'll struggle to see a heart rate at 180. And when I compare myself to mates, I'm like, their marathon, they're at 180. Their 5K, they're at 180. And weirdly, mine always seems to be 164. And I must get to around 164 and something must come into my head like, slow down. So it's really hard because I want to run. I love running. But then also when I'm feeling depressed, if I go for a run, there's this thought of I might drop dead. But actually, I don't mind that thought because I'm like, I don't want to be here anyway. So sometimes I run. It's probably also a self-sabotage for me. It's like, if I run, I might die. So like it's I've got a really weird relationship, I guess, with running.
You still feel that way?
Yeah. Sometimes if I feel really down, a run, like I could go, I never actually managed to do a hard run because I can't bring myself to do it. But there's this thought process of maybe if I go and do a really hard session, like, I don't know, 8 times 800, and I don't pull myself back and I just push as hard as I can, that will be when I have my heart attack. And that's also a really weird relationship to have with running because for me, running's medicine. But then also I can have this time where I'm like, shit, that could kill me, and I don't mind if it does. So yeah, it's pretty tough.
But did you say that sometimes you feel that you want that to happen?
Yeah, that when I'm really like down, because I still get episodes, but when I'm really down, there are times where I just go, cool, maybe this is me, like a run will just kill me. And there's something I've always wanted to do, which is 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 countries. And my wife's just like, you're not doing it. She's like, you're not doing that. Like, that's just too much strain on your heart. And that's something that always bugs me is I can't actually do what I want to do. So there's like all these challenges I'd love to do. And I'm like, look, that's no more strain on my heart than trying to go for a sub 3 hour marathon. But it obviously is because it's a marathon after marathon. And I think some days I'm just like, I don't really care if it happens. If it happens, it happens. But that's when I'm sad. But when I'm in a good frame of mind, I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely stupid to go and do.
Yeah. I mean, and I hate to kind of kind of go deeper into this bit, but it just seems really sad to hear, the journey that you've been on kind of since that initial moment where you felt definite to end your own life, and the help that you've got that's helped you change. And we're going to talk about the successes that you've been able to do in not only your running and your marathons and your majors, but also in your career, in your app, and how that is changing lives, and with the Refugee Run Club. It's heartbreaking to hear that you still have these thoughts today that are very present. And that is also linked intrinsically with a relationship with running. And I don't really know what to say other than I just hope you're okay. And I just wonder if there are ways in which that could be alleviated so that you no longer have those thoughts at all.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that, and I was having this conversation with mates in Pakistan. I was like, people throw around the depressed word quite a lot. And actually, a lot of the time, you can just be having a really shit day. But if after 2 weeks, you're still feeling really shit, like you need to go and see like a therapist, because you shouldn't be feeling that low for 2 weeks. And that's not, I've never read that anywhere. I'm not a doctor, but that's just how I feel from my personal experience. When I speak to friends, I'm like, you're having a bad day, sleep it off. Tomorrow's a new day. But if after 2 weeks, you've still not left the house, like you're in a bad place, mate. Like, ring Samaritans, go and get some therapy, like speak to your work. What's the EAP? And I think for me, I just live with the fact I will always have mental health. Like, well, we've all got mental health, but I just live with the fact that I will go up and I could be on cloud 9, and then I could literally be completely down in the dumps. And that's just being completely open. Like, I'd love to say that I believe in 10 years' time I can live without depression, but I've just learned to live with myself that when I am at the rock bottom, I know that I've got my coping mechanisms to get me out of that. So I can confidently sit here now and say, I don't believe I will ever take my own life. Whereas I couldn't have said that probably even 4 years ago. I couldn't have said that. Whereas now I can confidently say I will never take my own life. But I can't confidently sit here and say I'm never going to have dark days again.
I understand that now, yeah. And it's nice that you can, to hear that's... I've been someone who suffered from depression, years ago in my life. And although I was never in a position where I wanted to act on taking my own life, I certainly had a lot of suicidal ideology in my mind. And that is something that is a very scary place to be. Because regardless of your confidence in not being able to act on it, I've understood that just having that presence there in your mind, and to some extent, and this is, I don't know if this has been your experience, but with my experience, and I'm going to be very open with you, the very thought, when I was in my darkest place, the very thought of killing myself made me feel better.
Yeah.
And in that moment, that was what could help, is by imagining that, because it took some of the pain away. And I was never someone who got in a position to act on it, but it was always very present in my mind. And I've since discovered, and I think I'm not someone, I'll happily admit I've not had help, but I was able to psychoanalyze my situation at that time. And I was very thankful that I was able to have people around me that could allow me that space to do that. So I wasn't ever on my own, even though I never really opened up and admitted about it. But I've since discovered, whilst understanding depression and understanding the mindset and the suicidal thoughts that go into your mind, that I was in a previous position earlier in my life where I also had that at a much, much younger age, when I was not able to understand what was going through myself then. And I never knew I was diagnosed with depression until I actually sneakily saw it on my doctor's notes once when I went in for some routine checkup. And this is when I was at university, and I saw, when he was out of the room, I looked over my doctor's notes and I saw depression. And that was at a time in my life when I was about 12 years old, when I just started a new high school. And it was that moment in my life when I was like, oh yeah, I was depressed. I hated my life back then when I was 12 years old, and that was just my life. And I didn't realize that that was a form of depression. And I suppose that has probably helped me understand. And like you said, you never knew you were depressed in that moment when you were. But having that diagnosis can help you understand what's going on in your mind. And if you can understand your mind, then you know the tool belt that you can use to alleviate those things, then that's a good place to be. But I've since discovered that I think once you have been in that position in the darkest, deepest moments of your life, and when you have suicidal ideology going on in your mind, whilst you can suppress it to some extent, for some reason, and maybe this is just the hallmark of someone who is depressed, it does return.
Yeah.
And the suicidal thoughts can return again. But I'm in a position, I'm glad that to hear you're in a position where you can understand that and know what you need to do to not let it take it over. And so I suppose I'm talking from my own experience to understand that, yes, I also, can have moments, or just maybe it's just a day when I do feel that pain, that depression pain. And then suddenly the thought of taking my own life is what kills that pain.
Yeah.
But it's not something I'm going to act on. And I also want to be open and honest about that. That's not something that I hope I'll never act on. But I also appreciate how scary it can be, because, and I don't know, and maybe we'll never know or maybe people have tried to take their own life, but and for whatever reason it's failed, and luckily they're still with us, but they've been in that place where they have gone to that point where there was no point beyond that, and probably will understand that those thoughts just took over their mind.
100%. And that is something I always get scared about, is like, I sit here now and I go, I confidently will never take my own life. But the reason why I believe I can get to say that is because I feel like I know what that looks like. And I feel that I've got enough people around me now who will reach out to me. And I've been struggling not that long ago. And I had the amount of people who just did reach out or call me. And it's like, they never ring me. And it's like, okay, they're seeing it. But the thing that I always do when I'm really, 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 really low, and weirdly, it's always when I'm getting in the shower. I don't know why, but it's whenever I get in the shower, it's like, there's this feeling where I'm like, right, that's when it all kind of comes back into my mind. And then I'll always get out of the shower, and I've got 2 notes on my phone that I always kind of talk about. And one is what I've done since that darkest day of my life and what I've achieved. And the next is, and it's always, that's just an ongoing list. And then my other one is that each decade I'm now starting. So there's a list on my phone, it's called 2020 to 2029. And it's a list of everything I want to achieve. And when I achieve it, I tick it. And that's what my go-to is. I come out and I look, and luckily for me, no matter how deep and dark those thoughts are, there's something in my mind that still makes me open my phone and look at that. And I go, shit, look at what I've done since I wanted to take my own life. I've started a business, I've had a family, I've got married, I've bought my own house, like all these things when I was the deepest. I've got new sets of mates, I've got running communities, I've got pals. I'm like, they're things I never thought I could have achieved. And then I look at things I want to achieve, and there's a mixture of there's family things, there's traveling things, there's business things, there's running things. And I'm like, if I take my life now, I'm not going to be able to manage to get to those. But when I wanted to take my own life years ago, I never even thought I could get them. So just by looking at that, that's like a bit of a calm down, don't do it, Pete. That's why it is honestly those 2 notes, why I think I will never take my own life. Where I fear is what happens when I've ticked everything and I can't think of new things I want to do, but I don't think that'll ever happen. I think there'll always be new ideas.
Yeah. Thank you for being so open and honest about this part of your life and your story. I really appreciate the conversation. I hope it can help other people maybe understand aspects of their own life as well. I want to move the topic away actually, and then talk about the Coopah running app, which is something that you've made a big part of your life. And well, let's talk about how that has developed, how that started, because it wasn't initially a running app to begin with, but you just had this, I suppose, you had a moment in your life where you knew you could do something with running.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I went for that run and I ran for an hour, but probably only ran 3K because I cried most of it. And I wasn't obviously running all that time. I remember exactly where in Stratford I sat and cried for about 30 minutes. And I do one day want to go back to there because I think it will be quite a nice feeling, the fact that I'm still here and I can go and do that. So I moved to Hong Kong and I was like, right, I'm going to go and do these major marathons for my mum. So to do that, I need to train. So I looked up running clubs, went to this running club, obviously an athletics club. And I just remember being told, what's your 5K time? Go in that group. No one spoke to me. And I was like, this just doesn't feel right. So I was like, right, I'm going to start a run club. I'm going to just start my run club. I don't really know anyone here. But I didn't. I went and got absolutely off my face, which is what I always do when I'm not coping well. And also I don't do that now, which is a way I know that I'm in a much better place. Like I can walk past a pub and not need a pint. And I started moaning about running. I was like, running's a beautiful sport, but everyone thinks you're weird when you run. Like people will shout out you out the window, get a car, you weirdo. Like it's just, you were seen as a weird when you ran pre-COVID. So I was like, I'm going to start a running club. And I started a running club and it didn't really have a name. It was just like, let's just start this run club. And if you want to come and you just want to run to that post and back and then sit and wait for everyone else, that's cool. If you want to come and run 100 miles and see us next week, cool. You can do whatever you want. There was no rules to this run club. The only rule was you came and you did whatever you wanted to do. That was the only rule. And if you were struggling, you would talk. It was like a safe place. And you look at it now in 2024 and there's run clubs on every corner. But back then there was Midnight Runners, there was Run Talk Run and Run Them Crew. And I can't really remember any other run clubs or communities, crews, whatever you want to call them. And Hong Kong had Midnight Runners, but that was it. But Midnight Runners for me didn't feel like quite right for me. I didn't want a boom in like music, like take over the city vibe. I think it's really cool, but it wasn't what I wanted. So I started it and just more and more people started to turn up every week. And I was like, shit, this is incredible. Like it started with the expats because the expats in Hong Kong only hang around a very small area of Hong Kong. And then people from my office started turning up and then I started to tell my story and then people from my office in Hong Kong's been known, like they're so far behind when it comes to mental health. And people in my office started opening up to me and was like, you know, there's a stigma still in Hong Kong, like, and they'd speak to me. And then I was like, look, let's all do some events. And then people would be like, oh, I'm doing Hong Kong Marathon. I'm going back to London. I'm going to do this run, blah, blah, blah. But what I realized was everyone just stopped training. And the only thing that they had as running as a habit in their life was the Wednesday nights at Pier 3, I think it's called Beer Bay, where we used to meet. And that was the only time running was a habit for them. And I was like, I need to change that. And I was like, I'm helping 100 people here make running a habit once a week, but there's clearly a problem with run coaching. So I was like, PDF plans are rubbish. Like they're just so generic. It's unbelievable. And I'm still shocked that some people to this day are like, PDF plans, like I just think they're just not right for people. So I turned and got a run coach and I was like, this is way too expensive. Like I'm not an elite runner, although we can feel like it when we run London. I'm not an elite runner. There's no way I should be spending £100 a month on this. I can't afford it. And I don't really love running that much. I'm doing this for my mum. And at that time I was still thinking I'm going to do the marathons and stop.
And these PDF plans, it's just because they're just a rigid structure.
Yeah. And who says that you can run a 4-hour marathon?
And you might get 3 options, you know, fast, slow, you know, medium,
beginner, intermediate, advanced. And it's like, I'm not a beginner because I've done 15 marathons, let's say, but maybe I am a beginner because I want to run it in 4 hours. And it was just really negative. Like you shouldn't put people into boxes. If you've run 15 marathons, you're not a beginner, you're an advanced runner. Just because it takes you 6 hours doesn't mean you're a beginner. And I just hated all the terminology around it. And I was like, we really need to change all of that. So yeah, I was just really just again, and probably because I was struggling myself. So anything that I saw just it put me off running. I was like, I'm not a beginner. So I've run a marathon. I'm definitely not a beginner, but because I want to do it in sub 4, apparently I'm a beginner. And it was just that, and also how rigid it was. Like, what if I needed to do a run tomorrow? And then I remember it was about 6 weeks in, and I just looked at my plan. I was like, there's so much pen written over this, and it was on my fridge. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. And I was like, I'll just give up. And then I just ran it, and I just would keep running races without training. And I was like, then there's got to be a way we can change this. And then that's when Coopah was born, as it is what you see today, which is a run coaching app.
I mean, you say that's how it started, but I mean, there must have been so much that kind of went into how you were able to launch a running app, because that's just not something that you just do, after a week of thinking of the idea. So you had this idea to have a digital running app, I suppose, to make it something that could be quite fluid and individual as well to someone else. But how did you go about actually doing this? Do you have any experience in that form of work yourself?
No. So all my work experiences have been in partnerships and sales. So I remember going, right, I need to see if people actually think the same as me, because I'm a bit odd that people might not think the same as me. So I remember going from the in-person run club. I set up a website and we called it Coopah, and there was an old logo, and it was basically just a website where you'd pay £30 a month, £30 a year. That gave you access to nutrition advice, basically just everything you needed as a runner: nutrition advice, strength and conditioning videos, yoga videos, training advice. There was like an open community where you could ask questions. We didn't have training plans. We were like, there's no training plans on here. And people started like paying, and I was like, okay, so there's definitely a gap for this. And then I basically said to all these people, what is your problem with running? And they were like, training plans. And I remember investors saying to me, but why hasn't Strava built it? Like, if it's that much of a problem, Strava would have seen it and built it. It's a great way to grow their share of wallet. And I was like, yeah, good point. Maybe I shouldn't do this. And then I remember going, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to put a job ad out on workandstartups.com. So I put a job ad out, and I was like, I've got this running community of about 100 strong in Hong Kong. I have about 50, 60 people paying me £30 a year to access this website. I believe I've got a very, very small brand. Pitch to me what you would do with it. And 95% of people pitched a cool, fashionable running brand, because at that time there wasn't, Say Sky had just started and Soar, but other than that, there wasn't really many cool that were out there brands.
So like apparel,
gear, yeah, gear, just pure gear. And I was like, what if we just make the best quality kit that's really cool? And that's what everyone was pitching to me. But I knew that I didn't want that. I knew that I wanted to build a whole new market in running. And then this guy came on board, and I remember it clear as day. I got the email, and it was a 20 page presentation on why run coaching is broken. And the opening slide was 58% of people give up running after 30 days. And I was like, if 58% of people are trying running and giving up, and they're like me, then no wonder there's a mental health pandemic, because we need running as part of our cocktail. So I rang him, and I was like, I want to interview you. And luckily this guy had built and sold 3 businesses. So it was kind of like the perfect match. It's like, right, he gets that run coaching's broken. Admittedly, he's a very, very good runner, so he doesn't quite get the market, but that's fine, because I'm that 4-hour guy who can build this together. He knows how to build a business. And I was like, right, we want to work together. So he said, how we're going to do it is I'll work for 6 months. We'll see how well we get on. We'll have some KPIs. If it works well, we'll go into business together. And I was like, cool. He was on an earn out from his old job. I quit my job. And
you were based off investment at this time?
No, at this point we had no investment.
Right.
It was all purely just us putting our own money in.
Sure.
And then he said to me, we need to go and do a friends and family round to build a small proof, like an MVP, minimum viable product. Luckily for me, I was working for Expedia, and everyone was getting made redundant. So I rang 3 of the senior board and said, I'm looking for 30 grand here. And it was very much like back of a cigarette paper business plan, back of cigarette pack, business plan. And I was like, this is what we're going to build. This is why we're going to build it. This is the total addressable market. This is what we think, how many people can use it. And we were very much using Strava's numbers. There's 56 million people using Strava. This is how many are paying. This is how many would need run coaching. And we got, I think it was 5 people to give us about anything from 5 to 10 grand. And we went and built the app. And the whole thing we did with the app was just give it to people and say feedback, like, would you pay for it? What's wrong? And we didn't care about what was good. All we cared about was what was bad. And we were like, what's not making you log in every day? What's not making running a habit? And we were obsessed about the app making people run. That's like what we cared about, because our bread and butter is running is medicine. So if I can get people logging onto the app and going for a run every day, then we're making the world a better place. And then before we knew it, we had about 200 paying customers, which is obviously not enough to quit your job, build a business. And we were like, let's go and do like a seeders round, so like crowdfunding. But what we didn't know is if you want to raise 500 grand on seeders, you need to launch with about 400 grand. So actually, we then had to go out and find people who could invest. And I'm not from like a background where there's loads of money. So I just had to graft, and I had to ring people who were also in sales and maybe they had a good quarter. I was like, do you want to put like a few grand into this business? Like, no idea if it's going to work, but there's tax reliefs and all this. Like at this point we had SEI, which is like if you get 50% of what you invest back, and if it fails you get, I think it's 80% back, but hopefully we won't fail, so I never think about that. And we just grew it, and then I think we raised about 460 grand on seeders, and we've managed to make that last until now, which has been about 18 months, and we've just gradually grown the round. But what we did was we very much were like, I believe run coaching is broken. I believe what charities offer and running events like London Marathon offer to their runners is poor. And I really believe that if we make people enjoy running, they will return and do more events. So you will get these small events selling out because people want to run races. So I'd go to these partners, and Siobhan at Run For All I Will Love Forever. She was the first ever partner. And I remember traveling to Leeds. I was still working for Go-Kartlers, travelled to Leeds, and I met her in this hotel and I pitched to her what Coopah was going to be. And she was like, if you build that, you'll be successful. And I was like, do you want to be our first ever partner? And I was like, yeah, cool, you're in. And I remember my dad-in-law picking me up because they live in Hull. And he was like, how did it go? I was like, we've won the lottery, mate. We've signed them. They have like 50,000 runners that go through their events. If we just get 10% of them, we're going to have 5,000 people using this app. Obviously that isn't how it went. But then we got our name out to the audience. So let's say you're running Rob Burrow Leeds Marathon, you get an email saying this is how you're going to train. And they got rid of all their PDF plans. And then I remember about 3 months into Coopah actually launching, Hugh Brescia from London Marathon downloaded the app, and I rang all my mates. I was like, which one of you's taking the mick here, like, and signed up with this email? So we're like, we'll email him anyway. And he was like, yeah, can you come in and have a meeting with us? We were like, what? Like, this app is 3 months old and it was rubbish.
So who's Hugh? Sorry.
Hugh is the event director of the TCS London Marathon.
Right. He's one of the big dogs.
He's one of the big dogs
for London Marathon.
The London Marathon. And we were like, right, off we go. And Dan and I walked in, and we walked into the main boardroom, and there must have been 8 people from London Marathon there and us 2. And he was like, we want to build this, but we're an events company. How can we get involved? How can we partner? And for about 18 months, so literally from the start of Coopah, we spent 18 months discussing how this could work for TCS London Marathon and all their other events. And then they turned around and was like, we're going to invest in this. And obviously when you then go out to investors and you're like, we're being backed by the London Marathon, it just adds credentials. People are like, okay, if there's, because nobody knew this market. Like people were like, what? I don't understand what you're doing. Why aren't, like, that's Strava? And we're like, no, Strava is a social media tool. We're building run coaching to help people be better runners. And the minute we said London Marathon are behind this, we just had so many people wanting to invest because it shows credentials. So we've really been on quite a journey. Like like you're right. It's not that you just suddenly start this. There is a lot behind that goes into building a business, and just getting like 1,000 subscribers onto an app is a really, really hard thing to do. Like not many people manage that. To then build it into what we've built it into now is probably even less percentage. And I really believe though that anyone can do it. I think you just need a lot of guts. You need that when you tell me it's shit, you go, cool, mate, I'll screenshot this and I'll send you this in 5-10 years. And I think that is just the key to any kind of entrepreneurial drive. It's just having that grit and determination that what you're building will work, and there's enough people out there who will believe in you. And there's people who have come in the round we've just closed, which we closed today actually, and they are like, I wish when you pitched this to me 3 years ago and the valuation was a lot less, I came in. But it just shows like, and I'm the same, I wouldn't invest in someone's back of a cigarette pack idea. But once you've got users and people talking about it, it's a safer bet.
It's a snowball effect, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see how big it can be until it's already rolling down the hill, and then sometimes it's too late, especially with investments. You talked about a lot of the successes of the app. What have been the biggest challenges with building a tech-based company?
The biggest challenges are definitely building a product isn't cheap. So building good tech isn't cheap. And we wanted to, from the offer, we want to build this in-house. We want all our developers to be in-house and employees of Coopah. But that's expensive. And we didn't raise a big round because I didn't want to lose my mates' money or people who invested in me like loads of money. So we wanted to make sure we had a good product. And we were like, if we have a good product, someone might still buy us. So the biggest challenge is really getting the name out there. So we didn't have any marketing budget. So everything we had to do was with like no cash. So it was really hard to get people to know our brand. Brands with a lot of money behind them can just go and do a load of Instagram ads. They can sponsor every event. They can pay for every event. They can, they can pay for pay-per-click. They can do ads on the App Store. But brands like us who didn't want to do this by taking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds in investment, and we were always like, we want to build something where we can always sell. So we can always make a return to our investors. And that was my biggest fear, is losing people money. So the biggest challenge is definitely getting the name out there, and making people understand that you can use a run coaching app to get better. But just gradually over time, you've mentioned it earlier, it's that snowball effect. Like, someone's doing London Marathon next year. How did you train? Oh, I used the official training app, Coopah. And to date, we'd only spent £25,000 in marketing. So we're where we are now, spending £25,000 in 2.5 years. And it's literally word of mouth. All our users come from word of mouth. And I think that's what's beautiful, is when people download our app, we know they've probably heard from it either from the event or because their mates used it. And I think that's beautiful. Although we have just done a big fundraiser, so now we can do a bit more marketing. But that's definitely been the challenge, getting people to know what the app is and why it's good.
Let's talk about the user experience then. Let's say from an event point of view, let's say they've not heard of you. And so they've signed up to an event, they get the official welcome email and lots of information about what's happening with the event. And then here you go, we've partnered with Coopah Running App. When they click that link, what do they get?
So when they click that link, it will be one of two ways. Usually on the early journey, it will go to our website and explain what we do and how we're going to help them. We have lots of landing page set up. So it will be like run through specifics. You're doing Leeds Marathon, it will be the right branding, because they've just given money to that company. So they trust that company. They trust they're going to have a great event day experience. So you'll click that link and it'll explain it. And then as we get closer to event day, so like 16 weeks out, 12 weeks out, 8 weeks out, they'll click a link and it will go straight to the App Store if you're on your phone, or Google Play, depending on your phone. Or if you're on a desktop, it will go to scan a QR code, and then you scan the QR code. So our whole strategy is get people to know what we do early when they first enter, because that could be a year out, and then gradually get them to click and go straight into the app and sign up. And then once they're in that app, they get a referral code. They get 2 weeks free based on the partnership. And then they search their race. So you could put in Leeds Marathon, and then we will say, okay, Leeds Marathon, it's on the 5th of July, 2025, 15 weeks to go. And then we ask them a range of questions. And then from those range of questions, we have thousands, tens of thousands of algorithms in the back end that builds a plan that's personalized to them. So how many days they want to train, what time they want to do, what their 5K currently is, all these sort of questions.
Yeah, I've used the app, so you can say how many runs you want to do. It's so personal to the person, and so how many runs you want to do per week, what days you want to do the runs on, what days you don't want to do, even the details of which days do you have the most time and which days do you have the least time. When do you want your hardest workout? Even before you have a big block, you can choose to do a build-up plan for shorter distances. It connects to your devices as well. Is it integral to things like Strava?
Yep. So it's integrated to Strava and your, like you said, your watches and stuff too. And that's something that's really important that we've learned. And this is the thing, the more people who come on, the more important you learn. So connecting to Strava and them not having to upload the run to Strava because they then need to get into two apps is really important. Another thing is, especially in the UK customers, is people love parkrun. And our users, our brand is very much like, we believe we are like the parkrun of running apps. Like, we're for everybody. You can turn up and it doesn't matter if you haven't got running shoes, you can go and do a parkrun. And that's what I love about parkrun. And that's how we want to be with Coopah. Like, it doesn't matter if you want to do a 5K in 2 hours, we'll give you a plan for that. So we quickly learned that people wanted on a Saturday, they'd put like run on a Saturday and then the session wasn't park run, so you can add park run now into your sessions. So every week you can go add park run and then you get a park run every week. Or you want to run with Midnight Runners on a Tuesday night, you can go in and add that as a manual run. So the whole thing that we've learned is the app has to be as flexible as possible, because if you allow people to go for it, I don't want to stop you going for a run. Because you text your mate and go, oh mate, I've got 10 times 400s tonight, do you want to do that? And they're like, no. So then you could look, oh, on Friday I've got an easy 5K, I'll move that. But then if your mate wants to do 8K, we don't want to stop you doing 8K. So we allow that flexibility to add and adjust the runs you've done as well. And that's been really important to us, is being able to make it as flexible as possible, because then people really feel it's personalised to them.
So you had this, once you put in all the information, your algorithm is going to calculate something that's going to be best representative of what someone can achieve, including, I suppose, what their current time is and what their target times are. What is their journey when they take on that plan? Does the training evolve? Is it connected to data in real time?
Yeah, so if you've got a watch, it'll be connected to the watch and the Garmin will talk back to Coopah. If it's recording on the app, then we obviously know that. And then there's, I won't say what it is, but there's some tests in there where you don't know that maybe you're going out to do a 5K tempo. We're actually wanting to see how well you're running at that point. And then that's when and it's not a 5K tempo, by the way, but there's runs in there that we have as tests, but we would never tell someone it's a test, because mentally that's not a nice thing to know that we're testing you. And then it can adapt your plan. So if you like smash that run, we're like, hang on a minute, you can do much faster. So then we'll adjust your plan to make you run faster. And we're working on having prompts as well. So say you really smash a run, it could be like, Tom, based on that run, we think you could run this half marathon in 2 hours, not 2 hours 30. So it adapts as you go based on the data you're filling out. So it's really important that if you've had a bad run, you don't lie and tell the app you've had a good run, because actually maybe the plan you're on isn't right for you. And the reason why we do that is it goes back to that beginner, intermediate, advanced. Is like, you might be starting as a beginner, but just because you're a beginner, it doesn't mean you can't do a sub 25K, because actually you might be a super fit footballer or netball, hockey player, whatever it is, or just a really fit person in general. So we want to make sure that there is no beginner, intermediate, advanced, and it adapts based on you, because no one knows your body better than you.
And let's say someone has a bad week, 3 or 4 weeks into their training plan, and they miss all their sessions. What's the app going to do in that situation?
We can go on the app now, because it would be exactly what's it saying to me is it will go, we've missed you. And then it will be like, how do you want to move forward? Do you want to restart a plan to start from fresh? Do you want us to adapt the plan for you? And then we push you to speak to a coach, or it's resume training. And that's actually a really important thing for runners, is at that point, what you should be doing is messaging the coach and being like, hey, Tom, I've not ran for 7 days. I've been on holiday. How can I adapt my plan to get back into running? And one of the unique things about Coopah, and one of our USPs, is everyone on our app who is a coach is a qualified run coach. They're not customer support people. They're not AI bots. They're a real life running coach who's qualified. So you message them, we can look at how you've performed over those 6 weeks, and then we can then suggest the best thing to do next. So yeah, we have a 24-hour chat with coach, and we try to respond to everyone within 3 hours.
So I suppose this is a form of gamification of training. You can see in real time your successes and celebrate that, and know that you've got some accountability in your week and your schedule, and also the flexibility to change that. And I suppose the user experience is so easy that you can just each week you can be like, actually no, I'm going to adapt this week because I know what I've got a busy day this week, so I can change that one. Are there any downsides though to gamifying training when people can become obsessive and feel the need to have to tick all those boxes when perhaps their body isn't feeling it, or their state of mind or what's going in their life is not allowing them to actually, there's a fear of failure, right? If you've got 4 sessions this week and suddenly you've got a busy week and you've not done them, how does the app kind of cope with not getting people to be too obsessed to their own detriment?
Yeah, and I love that question. It is the question that I always ask our product team is, streaks are great, but what happens when you miss a run and you go back to zero? How does that make that person feel? What happens when actually you don't want to go for a run, but you're so obsessed with it, you've got to go for a run, and then you might have a shit run because actually you've just landed back from Pakistan, you're absolutely shattered, and a run isn't the best thing to do. Actually, sleeping's best. So that's why we always try and push 2 things. One is always, the coach is always there. So if you're feeling down, speak to the coach, or the fact you can add a run manually. So you can either change your run to be like, I don't feel like it today, let's change it to tomorrow, or add a run manually because actually, do you know what? I don't want to do an interval session this week because I've just recovered from a cold. I just want to add 5 times 30-minute easy runs this week. So that's how we try and get around that obsessiveness. I think it will be impossible to actually ever stop that obsessiveness. If somebody wants to run it, and being honest, they're probably the people who are going to get the best times because it's no secret to be a better runner, you run more. The more consistent you are as a runner, the better you're just going to become. If you can do interval tempo and a long run every week, you will. If you do that for 5 years, you're going to be a better runner. It's like, I always say, people laugh at this analogy, but I'll say it is, when I went to uni, I wanted to be the best drinker at uni. So to get a better drinker, you drink 3 pints on a Wednesday, then you grow to 4 pints the next Wednesday, 5 pints the next Wednesday. Running's actually no different. If you want to run a marathon and you can run 15 miles week 1 and then like as a combined week, then you go to 16 miles, 17 miles. If you gradually pick it up, you're going to become a better, longer runner. And yeah, people always laugh when I say that, but it is no different. It's like eating. If you eat a McDonald's every day, you're going to gradually become fatter. And it's the same with running. If you just run every day or twice a week, it could be that all you need to do is run twice a week, you will become a better runner. And that's why we want to make running a habit, because if you can make running a habit, then you will be a better runner.
And a big part of your story and your journey, which we've talked about today, is your own journey of mental health. And that's how Coopah actually initially started, with the Run Club in Hong Kong and having that as the main focus. How are you incorporating that within the bigger business of this digital run coaching app?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do on social media and where we turn up is showing that running's medicine. It's a lot about sharing my story and why running saved my life. But then now we're trying to work with other kind of partners who believe in that as well. So we've just done a collab with Samaritans, November. So that's kind of how we're doing it, kind of outwardly facing. So I guess that kind of showing the audience that we care. But actually there's a lot going on in the background at the moment about on the app and how we can really, like, we will never be a Headspace or a Calm. That's different. But how can we use certain features on the app? So actually it's just like, I just want to run. I don't want to do a race. I just want to run. Or I'm feeling down today, I can't get out. So like, can we add like mental health first aiders to the app? Like, so that's what is the next progression of the app we're really looking at, is how can we make this much more of a mental health running tool as well? Because I think we've nailed it for if you're running for an event, but actually if you just want to run, and I want to reduce that 58% number that I spoke about earlier, how do we get people just running consistently? And my wife's a great example of that. She ran the London Marathon. She was obsessed with the app for 6 months. She'd never ran before. She ran the London Marathon in about 6 hours, which I'm like delighted for her for. But now she stopped running. And that kills me that my app couldn't keep my wife running. And that's what keeps me up at night. You go back to the challenges, that's what keeps me up at night. Like, so I say to her now, like, just use the app, 2 runs a week, do a 5K run, and just get out of the house twice a week. And I think the problem is because it's focused on a time, it doesn't help. So what we want to look at is how do we just have a keep running plan? And at first they wanted to call it the Keep Fit plan. And I was like, no, because you could not be fit and you can still run. So I'm super passionate about how we turn up in that, because I think the language you use is so important. Like, keep fit. Well, what if you're not fit? Or what if you are fit, but you don't want to keep fit? There's so many things when it comes in the words of what we use. So I think it's going to launch this quarter, I hope. I've been told it's going to launch for a while. But there is going to be like a keep running plan, or just get running. But the onboarding for that's so sensitive. Like, you don't want someone to answer the wrong question or feel that the question's not for them. So we've done a lot of customer work on that, on how we can, what's the right wording to use? Because
I suppose business problem for you is that people will, get a coaching app or plan for a race, but how do you keep them engaged and customers after this? You have a subscription based model, right?
Correct.
And you want people to be, not just from a business point of view, but also from just being how great running is in your life. You want people to have that continued in their life. So there's always, I suppose, a problem with how do you get people post event? How do you keep them motivated?
And this is what I always say, whether it's to my mates, whether it's to investors, and they're like, "Why will you be successful?" And it's like, because I don't look at this as a business. I don't look as Tom's downloaded the app. How am I going to get $9.99 from every month? I go, how am I going to make Tom still be running in 3 years? Because that's what I care about. I care because I've seen myself the power of running, and it saved my life. I care about every single person downloading that app not stopping running. So I'm obsessed with the churn number, because I don't want anyone churning. Not because people churn and we make less money, is because why have they stopped running? What are they doing now? Are they still running? And there are times I've reached out to people before and I've been like, hey, seen you've left, like, no worries about the fact you've left, just want to make sure you're still running. And they're like, oh yeah, still running, but I'm just doing part run once a week. And then they reply and they're like, why did you ask that? And I was like, because I genuinely care that you are running, because I see running as part of that cocktail. And if you're not running, are you okay? Like, and I think people get shocked, because sometimes I do it to complete randomers. Like, I'll just send them an email and be like, just checking in, are you still running? And that's why I think we are still successful and will be successful, because I'm so much more passionate about people running for their mental health, rather than how am I going to turn you in from £10 into £100 a month. I care about people turning up and running and logging their runs every day.
And to keep people engaged for long periods of time, the app has to keep on evolving. So that it's being different. So if it's just the same all the time, people will just get bored of it, and they'll just figure out how they can just do it in their own life.
Exactly.
So that's obviously also, I suppose, not necessarily pressure, but a constant kind of excitement, knowing that there's always going to be new things on the horizon that you want to try and incorporate to evolve this going forward to keep people going. What is the evolution of these digital running apps? Because you were on the first wave of this, and others are also out there. What is going to be the future? How is this going to evolve? How is AI going to come into this?
Yeah, it's really funny, because there's 2 apps out there at the moment, and I don't believe there's any other app out there really that works well, but neither of us were actually the first to market. And I find that really, really interesting. There was a few apps that when we started, and they're on our investor decks, that were out there, and they just didn't make it work. So I won't say the apps because I don't want to talk down, but they actually did an amazing job of creating great tech and great apps, but they just couldn't quite, I don't know what it was. There was just something that people just didn't connect with. Whereas there's now 2 apps who pretty much own the market. And I think nearly all these other apps have either gone out of business or sold the apps to be something else. And I guess it's now for us to, as an app, is to stay ahead of the game, because there's always going to be other brands coming out and trying to, and we see it all the time. Like, we see so many apps just coming onto the market, and then 6 months they're gone again. There was a big one in America, got massively backed, and it failed after 6 months. And I really think it is just always keeping up with the evolution of run coaching apps. And I seriously think that it is just making sure that people enjoy running. If people enjoy logging on to Coopah every day and they want to be on Coopah, then they will stay with Coopah. And I think it's just making your life easy. Like you said, it's very easy for someone to go, I think I get now how I can coach myself, but it's that accountability. Like, people are busy. They'd rather pay a few quid a month to be told what to run every day and it be in their watch than spend that time. And I'm a big fan of time is money. Like, actually, for me to go and manually put that run into my Garmin, to then upload it to Garmin and run every day. So let's say I'm running 20 times a week, 20 times, it takes me 5 minutes. That's actually taking me 1 hour 40. And then you work out what your salary is, divide it by your hours, you're actually losing money. So why wouldn't you pay for an app where there's a Team GB coach methodology behind it and you see that you're performing? So for us, I think there's two things. It's constant. At the end of the day, we are a run coaching app. So no, take out all the other gimmicks like partner gifts, all of this sort of stuff. We have to keep making people faster or making running a habit. So continually to improve our app, and that will one day probably be AI, but it will never, for us, it will never be purely AI. We always want that human interaction behind it, because I think that's so important. Because and we've seen it, people get injured easily, and there are other apps out there where they maybe failed or struggle because people get injured, and that's because they've tried to just use AI. Whereas when you have a human behind it, a human coach, they'll be able to check those problems. Like, AI might give you a ridiculous plan because it's always men as well. Men will go, my mate did a sub 3 hour marathon, so I'm going to do a sub 3 hour marathon. And then an AI plan doesn't know much about them, and they just give them a ridiculous run straight up, and they get injured immediately and they stop running. So I think in terms of, back to your question, the future is just constantly making sure our plans are the best plans on the market. But also then, how do we incorporate little bits of AI into it? But then also, how do we just make running a habit? And it will be just how we improve plans, like things like keep running plans, and gamification of it will definitely be where we see it, without giving too much away.
Yeah. Sport only benefits people when they can access it. I think this is one of your quotes. That I think I've read from you. This actually links into your partnership and setting up Refugee Run Club, which we spoke about at the very beginning. But I think we can divert the conversation and talk about this now, and what, or why you've had these links to Refugee Run Club and what that has brought to Coopah as a general thing. Because let's talk about that.
Yeah. I really, we opened it up about Pakistan, and you could probably see instantly that I was passionate about the fact people can't access running there. And I just think it's so true. Like, we can talk how beneficial sport is and how beneficial running is, but if you can't afford to access it, then what's the point? So I'm really passionate about the whole running market. So carbon shoes, amazing, but they're 260, 280 pounds, which automatically makes people not be able to see running as an elite sport, an expensive sport. And my biggest concern is running goes like cycling. I don't want running to be a really expensive sport and people think it's accessible and it's for, mid-age weekend millionaires, that kind of thing. Like, I want running to be for everybody. And my other biggest bug is when people go, the best thing about running is it's free. And it's like, it's not free, is it? Because you need to get running trainers. And let's just say we get a pair from Decathlon, that's £50. You need to get a pair of running shorts, running shirt. Now running's cool, so people want to fit in. So people want these like wanky sunglasses. They want all of this shit. And it's actually like the most beautiful thing about running is it could be free, but people don't allow it to be free. Like, there's no reason why I can't go for a run in my trousers and hoodie. Yeah, I'm going to sweat a lot, but as long as I've got a pair of shoes that aren't going to injure me, that's actually all I need. But too often now we need to fit in, and it does worry me about how cool running's getting, because I do think it is putting people off running as well. And that's why I love parkrun, because parkrun still feels like a place I can just turn up and run. So when we first started Coopah, I was really passionate, and I loved the story of Tom's, the shoes, like those loaf, like those slide on slippers type things. What I loved about them is, I remember the first time I heard about it, I wanted to buy a pair, not because I wanted a pair. It was because I knew if I bought a pair, they'd gifted one to someone from a poor background in South America who can't access shoes. And I was like, that's beautiful. Like, they're not just building a business, they're helping people. So when we first started Coopah, I was like, right, what we're going to do is for every trial, every sign up we get, I'm going to give the NHS a Coopah subscription for life to give to someone who goes in and gets diagnosed with any mental health illness. So I quickly realised that was impossible. Not impossible, I'm still wanting it to happen and we're working on it and we have some really fun, exciting meetings coming up. But I realised that was a long dream. So then my business partner, Dan, he said to me, look, my dad and mum have a refugee charity. They've all got problems, like the trauma that they go through. Like people think that they just get flown here and stay in a 4-star hotel. I know you've interviewed Freya and she's gone into that. Like that's not the case. They're locked up in this hotel where they're probably sharing a room with 4 other people. They get £8 a week. They can't access sport or running. It's near to impossible. And he was like, if we could just get them to a park run running, then it would be amazing. So I was like, cool, let's take all your mum and dad's charity to their local park run. And I'll never forget the first one. About 15 people turned up and only about 7-8 of them ran. But the looks on their faces when they turned up and compared to when they finished was just a thing of beauty. And I was like to Dan, we just want to work with as many refugees and gift them Coopah for life. So if you're a new refugee coming to the UK and you want to do exercise, there's obviously not everywhere, but in 8 hubs around the country, there are hotels where you end up in them and you can go and do a park run as a group. So we can take the Crystal Palace one, has about 30 refugees every week, and they turn up in Crystal Palace as a group, which is a big statement because you're turning up to a predominantly white sport and you've got 30 refugees there, all with Refugee Run Club on their back, and they go for a run. And we're now working with Park Run to say, look, if it's 3 laps and they only want to run 1 lap, still let them finish because they need to fit in. And it's so important that they still go through and get their barcode and get a time at the end. And that's just something that we've grown since day one of the app. So since taking it from a little park run where we've had 7-8 people actually run it and 15 people turn up, this year we had 5 refugees run the London Marathon. New Balance kitted them out in full New Balance kit and gave them a VIP day out. And the thing I'll never forget is they turned up to the expo and I was like, how's everything going? And they're like, it's amazing, but I think they've made a mistake. And we were like, oh, what's the mistake? And they were like, well, we've got to this really nice hotel and we have a room for ourselves. Like, we don't mind sharing all 5 of us in one room. And I was like, they just took that as that was a mistake because they are so used to being bundled into a hotel with like £8 a week. And I was like, wow, we've come a long way. We've come from literally scrambling around to get mates kit to kit them out to run a park run to then being fully kitted out by New Balance, getting that elite race experience and running the TCS London Marathon. And that's now what we strive to do. So we strive to get as many refugees running as possible, get them all in top quality kit. And there's brands like Hilo Athletics who are amazing. They come to Crystal Palace, they give the kit. New Balance they've all been amazing at gifting them kit. And then we work with our partner events like Run for All, London Landmarks, Royal Parks, London Marathon to give them an amazing experience. And last month, 3 weeks ago, I went to the park run on the Saturday at Crystal Palace and I said to Baraki, who's one of our refugees, are you looking forward to the half marathon tomorrow? And he was like, yeah, it's going to be a long way. Do you think I'll come last? And I was like, oh, you won't come last because there's 16,000 people doing it. And he was like, pardon? And I was like, yeah, there's 16,000 people doing it. He was like, no, that's not true. And I was like, no, there's 16,000 people running this Royal Parks tomorrow. Anyway, we get to Royal Parks and there's obviously this massive event village and we gift him some high-low kit. We gift him a Coopah t-shirt because we want them all in new kit. And just the picture of him, how he's gone from turning up and him just feeling like he belongs is why I do it, because it's just so beautiful to see. Like, this guy is turning up with like no running gear at all and he's going and running with 16,000 people and he's getting the same feeling that me and you would. And it's that belonging. He feels like he now belongs here because people say hi to him and they don't just see him as this refugee. Like, he's able to go for a run, and it really is a beautiful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it's so poignant that that parkrun is such an integral part of that process. It's like the community village all coming together, isn't it? And on a Saturday morning, and I've been to the Crystal Palace parkrun, and I've heard them shout out and celebrate the Refugee Run Club when they're there.
That's good.
And it's not just about giving people access to sport, it's also about integrating them into British society. And there's nothing better of British society in the last 10 years than parkrun. And it's not just about that run, it's about the conversations you can have with people who are in your local area as well, and getting to know them. And, you know, whatever stories and adventures that can bring from just connecting people as well, and saying, and also for people to have a human experience of what a refugee looks like and is.
Yeah.
Because one of the big problems we have in our British society is the news and media, which portray refugees a certain way, which is not an accurate perception of, and is dehumanizing them.
Exactly. And that is the biggest thing, is they'll see what they see in the Daily Mail. They're on a dinghy and they just think that they come in here to do bad things. And that's not true at all. And when I was in Pakistan, I was speaking to someone who is helping refugees get out of Afghanistan. And like, the thing that I always tell people is, these Afghan refugees, they were fighting side by side the British Army against the Taliban. Like, they are literally fighting with us, and then we're not welcoming them into our country. Like, I just feel like that's so wrong. Like, these people are literally trying to do the same thing as why we're there, to stop the Taliban, and then we don't want to let them into our country. Like, I just feel like there's such a big divide. And it was the same when I went to Pakistan. People were like, why are you going to Pakistan? Like, it's really dangerous. You're going to get killed. And like, literally, when we were in Pakistan, people couldn't do more for us. The amount of times people randomly saw us stood on the side of the street and asked where we were going, and just took us to the cricket stadium, or invited us to have dinner with their family, or said, do you want to try some home cooked meal? We'll bring it to your hotel. Like, it's amazing how we see in the media that Pakistan's this ridiculously dangerous place. But actually, when you stop living blind and you go and see it, you're like, this is the most beautiful country ever with the most beautiful people. And it's like, I'd much rather have a lot of them in our country than I would these people who don't want to do anything for society, and just want to moan. And it's exactly the same with refugees. Like, I always say to people, come in to my Refugee Run Club, come and meet them, come and speak to them, come and have coffee and cake with them, and you'll see that they're not what our media say they are.
Where are your Refugee Run Clubs right now, and what parkruns are they connected to?
So we've got one in Leeds, which is an amazing, two amazing volunteers up there. We have one in Slough, which is Upton Court Park Run. We have one in Coventry. We have one in Bruton Park, which is Solihull. We have, and the Coventry Bruton Park one and Crystal Palace are like our three kind of best ones, like biggest. There's always a good amount that turns up. And then we also have a few smaller ones. We're hopefully launching one in Clapham and Battersea very soon. And then we have, where's the other one? Oh, Kingston. So what we're now trying to do though is we're trying to look at it regionally. So how can we build a refugee hub in London, and then another refugee hub in Liverpool, another refugee hub in Manchester? So then if you get evacuated, because one of the things with these refugees is they can just literally be pulled out of their hotel overnight. So if you get moved from London to Birmingham, you know that there's a parkrun hub where you'll be welcomed. So we're working with Parkrun on building these regional hubs. So if you get moved to St Helens, which is an example we've got from our Crystal Palace one, they can turn up to St Helens Parkrun and know they'll be welcomed. So that's now what we're working on, how we can build out hubs of parkruns rather than our first dream, which was a Refugee Run Club at every parkrun. We've realised that's pretty impossible to do because it's over 500. But if we can have hubs that, let's say, Tom, we know you've just been moved from London to Birmingham. Here's our Birmingham hub. Like, connect with this person, then we think we can help a lot more refugees in the area that way. So yeah, the charity is always changing strategy.
It's an incredible part of your story with Coopah, and it's really heartwarming to see that the impact that it's having on people, not just the refugees, but the people who have their interactions with them as well. I want to close things, and actually, perhaps, I mean, it's a great place to kind of come full circle from talking about your trip to Pakistan. But perhaps I wonder if you've got, because you've always been someone who's heralded the kind of everyday athlete kind of attitude. And I wonder what advice well, we'll talk about two things: to aspiring runners, but also maybe to aspiring entrepreneurs. But we'll go through the runners first. What advice do you have for new runners, especially those very hesitant to start, especially when they see or they have friends who are part of these big, wide running communities, and they've gone on their own journey, and you just see that is just too far away from who you could be?
Ignore the noise, ignore social media, ignore Strava times. Running is for your mental health, running is medicine, and just make sure you enjoy it, because if you enjoy it, it's going to be a habit. If you compare yourself to everyone else, then you're never going to enjoy it, because you're never going to be Kipchoge. So if you're comparing yourself to someone who's running a 3-hour marathon and you're currently a 6-hour marathon, they're probably comparing themselves to Kipchoge. So just don't compare yourself to anyone, and just know what you want to do with running. Is it you just want to run a park run a week? Is it you want to run every day? Is it you want to do times? But have your own goals and ignore the rest of the noise.
I also think that running now has become so diverse. It's still a lot to be done in the diversity, but in terms of times, you can go to your parkrun now and you have everything covered. So no matter where you are in your running stage, if you're a fast runner, there's fast runners. But if you're a slow runner, you want to walk, now there is the park walkers. So it's no matter where you think you can be, you'll always, I think, find someone else who will be at a similar position to you. And you'll have that kind of, I'm not on my own here.
Exactly. And that's what's so beautiful. You might do your first part run, which is walking it. And then the next week you might go, I want to run 30 seconds and have 1 minute off. And then before you know it, you will be running the park run. And that it's a bit like what I was saying about drinking earlier. Like before you know it, you can run a 5K without being sick. And it's exactly like, that's what's so beautiful about park run. And there is no judgment at park run. And that's what I love.
What are the big lessons you've learned from building a business, grounded from your own personal experience and the trials and tribulations you've gone on in your journey?
Be yourself. Ignore what competitors are doing. Ignore what people who don't know the business are suggesting you to do. Like, you know the business better than anybody, and try to ignore it. But the other one is also focus on the negatives. Like, if you get a 1-star review, treat that so much more important than a 5-star review, because the 1-star review is an angry customer or an upset customer. If you can then talk to them and understand why they didn't like the app, then that is going to be much more valuable than being all excited that you just got another 5-star review, because those 1-star people are probably going to help you develop your app, because you need to learn. So just being able to take criticism really well, especially at the early stage when the product's not going to be great. Like, that's what you want. Like, those early adopters of the app or your business, like, really make sure they're the life and soul of the business, because they're who's going to start telling their friends, and make it just really important to focus on the negatives and how you can improve on those challenges.
And building something that's digital and app based, you're never far away from it. It's something that's present in your life all the time. So how do you balance your own entrepreneurship with your own personal well-being when this is, even the name Coopah is a play on your surname?
I don't do it well. I need to get much better at it. Things I can probably do is maybe delete things like Slack on the weekend, because also I don't want my employees seeing that I'm replying to stuff at 10 p.m. at night on a Saturday, Sunday, because then they might feel like they need to reply, and that's not the culture we want in the business. So I think it's really, really hard when, like you said, when we live in this digital age, if someone sends me a message, I get it instantly on my phone and I need to act on it. So if I see a 1-star review come through at midnight on Saturday night, I will want to go up and act on that and send them an email there and then. And that is really, really bad for my mental well-being. And if anyone can give me some tips on how to improve that, I'd love that. But it's things like turning off your notifications. That's what I always get told to do, or delete the app. But then my anxiety is too high. I'm like, I don't want to then turn my app back on at 7 a.m. and see all these messages, because that could have then ruined the business. So I think being a startup owner with depression, anxiety, OCD is really, really hard. Especially the anxiety part of it, because I struggle my big thing is I act on stuff instantly. So if you send something, I'll act on it instantly. I can't control my emotions, so I can't sit back for an hour and let it settle in, I instantly jump on it. And that's something I need to get much better on, is being able to sit back, understand why they've said that, and then reply. So
like a level of like binary kind of, you're on and off.
Definitely.
And there's no in between. I suffer from that when once I'm involved in something, compassionate about it, it's hard to then pull me away. And actually, I don't know if you find this, but my evenings are much more productive because I'm so much wired in, and I find it hard to relax and unwind because I built myself up to a point where I'm on.
Yeah.
And then I can't bring myself off.
Back off it. Yeah. And that's what I find super, super hard. Just little things like taking my daughter to nursery this morning, not checking Slack whilst walking in the pushchair with her, or taking her to the park and pushing her on a swing and not going on my phone. Like tiny little things like that I just find so difficult.
A conversation for another time, maybe when we're more experienced in that form of it. But Pete, I really thank you for your time today and for being so open and raw and honest about your story, and hopefully inspiring other people to get out there and run and to talk about their own mental health. Definitely. I think talking's just as important as the running. Thank you very much. Thanks, mate. Ooh. Oh, good timing. Good timing. Great timing. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes, where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find, and I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.